Back here on the Cam Show with an original friend of the Cam Show, really. Greenie, Dan Greenberg, covering the Celtics for Barstool Sports and the #1 online voice of the Boston Celtics, what I have to say. And look, I mean, we all love Mike Gorman, but now you are pretty much like you and Grandy are the longest tenured voices of the Celtics now. So how about that?
Well, Maxwell's there too.
Yeah,
Let's give Max some credit. He's been there too. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a number up there too. That helps. Yeah. But Greenie, I gotta ask. I mean, we last talked to you right before the finals. You had finally watched the '08 championship DVD, which I don't think they make anymore, which is too bad. I would really like one for this year. But how has this summer been? The summer of a championship for the first time in 16 years.
You know, it's fun. I mean, it's awesome. It's everything I hoped it would be and more, right? Let's start there. But I think Tatum said it best, right? Like, we spent so many years wondering what this moment was going to be like if they ever finally got over the hump with this core. But now that they've done it, it's just way better than I ever could have imagined, right? Like, you mentioned the DVD. They don't have that, but I'm watching all 5 episodes of the Celtics All-In series. I just watched Game 5 last night. It was like 1:30 in the morning. I just can't stop watching it.
Let's go.
It's been, I think, like 50-something days, but it may as well have happened last night to my brain. I'm going to be like this, I think, until, at least the first preseason game, until I can focus on something else. But for now, I mean, refill the cup of Kool-Aid and just, keep enjoying it.
Oh, well, then I got to ask this, because you just said you watched Game 5 over again, because I see your stream of consciousness on Twitter. I actually feel a lot of the same way in a lot of these games. And what Game 5 felt like, even though like they had it for a while, I'm guessing that you, like me, was like the last couple of minutes you were finally like, oh, wow, they're up by 20 points with 2 minutes left. All right, maybe they have this. So when you watch back, do you have like a new point in the game where you're like, oh, it should have been right here that I knew they had it?
I mean, the easy answer is the Pritchard heave, right? I mean, the half-court shot. But I think, like, I've been hurt so many times before that it got to the point where it really wasn't until Tatum started to take over with around 3 minutes left where you're sitting there and you're like, all right, not only I'm doing the scoreboard math, right? Like, I'm looking at the score, I'm looking at the clock, but then I'm watching him play a style of bully ball where it's like, you could tell that he knows he's on the cusp of it. And once you start seeing him attack the rim like he did in the final 3 minutes, it's just surreal. You're thinking like, holy crap, like they're doing it. We're watching them finally reach the top of the mountain. And it's like, even though we all know how it ends, I still get emotional seeing everyone hug Al Horford. I still like, I just can't believe it. And it's so awesome that for the rest of time, we'll be able to go back and watch these, series, highlights, whatever you choose to please yourself with in that moment. It's going to be like that for the rest of time. Like the fact that they're stamped at 26 and 27 in terms of Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum for the rest of their careers is such a blessing. And like I said, it's just better than I could have imagined.
And I think that's really I mean, obviously we care most about the Celtics winning the title, but within that, we're just so sick of hearing the discourse around those two guys specifically, Tatum and Brown. And, 16 years, it's not a short time. I wouldn't call it an incredibly long time for a championship drought, but the Celtics and their fans went through a lot in that time frame. We have seen like every iteration you can of an NBA team, a tank, a pretty good but not quite there contender, one that just needs one more piece. We saw all of that in that time, and the drama that came with it from the NBA media, which is maybe worse than any other sport in terms of just creating this drama. We talked about it last time you were on. Tatum and Brown, do they like each other? Can they play together? And then they win the championship. And for a couple of weeks, everything's all good and rosy, and then the Olympics come around. And then Derek White gets selected over Jaylen Brown to replace Kawhi Leonard. And then Jayson Tatum doesn't play a single minute in the first game at the Olympics. And lo and behold, we have drama again. And weirdly, Stephen A. Smith on the side of Jayson Tatum and the Celtics. And you wrote about this for Barstool the other day, this scorched earth rant that Stephen A. went on about how it's bullshit that you could just say, oh, yeah, we don't have a spot for Tatum in this game. break down your initial thoughts when you heard Stephen A. Smith say that, because I know it was something that you were thinking about as well. The whole Tatum benching and then, that's all right, Tatum's going to start next thing.
Yeah, it's just so maddening because after being gaslit for an entire playoff run of, like you mentioned, the media, ESPN, it didn't matter who it was. Like, I know what we're watching, and yet, like, we lived in a world where after an Eastern Conference, they win the Eastern Conference, and Jaylen Brown's named the MVP, and I'm watching Jayson Tatum clap and be happy for him, and yet I'm being told that he wasn't clapping. So it's like, you're already gaslit to now Steve Kerr's telling me that the reason that Jayson Tatum doesn't play in the opener is because you can only just play 10 guys in a 40-minute game, which is a lie. And then,
I didn't see that rule in there.
That's a lie. And then the issue was he couldn't find a combination of lineups to fit Jayson Tatum in, which is a lie, because that is Jayson Tatum's biggest strength, which is the fact that you can play him at any position in any lineup. And we're talking about a 26-point blowout. You can't play 1 or 2 minutes. So that was infuriating because, I think he knew what he was doing. He knew how bonehead of a decision it was. And then he continues to hide behind this matchups. That's not a real thing. And I think it's just as bullshit what he's doing with Haliburton and with Embiid. Like, the very next game, he played 11 guys. So against, in their opener, you're telling me you can only play 10 guys when it comes to Jayson Tatum. In the next game, all of a sudden you're playing 11 guys. But what happened to only being able to play 10 guys? So the fact that the reasoning we're getting and this, goalpost moving from Kerr, and it's good that it's not just people like me. Obviously I'm going to be annoyed as a Celtics fan. But you have Draymond Green calling out Steve Kerr for being a bozo. You got Stephen A. Smith. Like, everyone with a brain can understand that a guy coming off a championship who's the best player on the best team, who's 3 years in a row All-NBA first team, there's no reason that who won an Olympic gold medal in 2020 and was the second best. So it's like the last time he was on an Olympic team, they won the gold medal. Steve Kerr takes over. Team USA doesn't even place at the FIBA World Cup. Maybe he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. So it's unfortunate because the talent discrepancy is so large where ultimately it obviously it doesn't matter. But it's just frustrating that even after winning a title, and it's like, okay, they finally did everything that people said he had to do. Now we're on the world stage and you're going to kind of show him up like that. Just felt extremely messed up and kind of a dick move, if you ask me.
It just felt like the next chapter in the NBA soap opera of, all right, you got your championship, but we're going to embarrass you here. Like not just, hey, you're not going to play as much. This is going to be to an embarrassing level. And I mean, you're right. It's like, it sounds like the high school basketball coach who doesn't play one of his seniors on senior night. And he's like, it was a close game and it was a matchup. And it was like, okay, but the difference is Jayson Tatum is one of the best players on the team, and it was a blowout, right? So it doesn't. None of the math adds up. We're talking about a guy who has been a top 5 player in the league, as according to everyone who votes on it, the last 3 years, and he's not a top 10 player in his own country, which is no longer dominating the All-NBA list like it used to. So it's like, it just doesn't add up. And I like one of the points you brought up in there about his versatility. I mean, he can go out there with a couple of different groups. And what's funny, and a point that you made in the blog as well, is that the USA starting 5 and what they're going for has really not been their best group at all. LeBron's obviously been great, but it's been the first 2 games of the group stage, it was a lot of that Derek White unit actually was playing, showing out pretty well. And so obviously there was the controversy of White being picked over Jaylen Brown. And look, I think there's a lot of merit to that, even as someone who, believes in the team basketball and loves Derek White. But Derek has been pretty big on this stage.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny. It's like the national discourse is like, wait, Derek White is this good? It's like, yeah. We've been trying to tell you that for 8 months now. But it's just like you said, you add up, you got Steve Kerr and Grant Hill pulling all that stuff with Jaylen Brown before the Olympics. Then in the very first game, you got what they're doing to Tatum. It's like, when have we ever seen champions and, all NBA level players be subjected to this, bullshit, honestly?
It's crazy.
But then what makes it so infuriating is, like, on the other end, it's like we're seeing Jrue Holiday and Derek White flourish. So it's like, you want to be like, what the hell is going on? But then you're also like, yeah, it's great to see them play well.
Right.
And I just think it's part of what makes the Celtics so good is like, yeah, everybody is a plug and play type talent where, whatever's asked of them, you can figure out a way to make it work. So it's not surprising to me that Derek White, as, a superstar role player, right? Like he's like a Ginobili. He's like a superstar, right?
Yeah.
So he's filling the same type of role that he did on the way to a championship. It should be no surprise that he looks great in that role. And it's just like Joe Mazzulla gave you the blueprint on how to use all of these players. And the fact that Steve Kerr can't seem to figure it out is just mind-boggling to me. It's like, get this bozo out of here, give the team to Spoelstra, and just move on.
That would be an interesting one. I mean, as much as I hate that organization, man, Spo can coach. I know you might have heard that take before. Eric Spoelstra.
Yeah, I just feel like he's next up in line, right?
Probably.
So it's like, I don't know how Kerr got the nod when Spo's sitting right there, but I think it wouldn't surprise me, if in 2028 or in 2032, he's the next head coach.
And I even hate asking this next question just because it's been played to death and it happened a month ago and there's nothing we can do about it now. But you followed the Celtics closer than basically anyone on the planet. So I do value your answer in this. Would you, in Steve Kerr, Grant Hill's position, have picked Jaylen Brown over Derek White?
I mean, I would just because he's the better player. But like you said, it's not like it's a disastrous choice to pick Derek White for what he brings to the table. Like, I know how good Derek White is. We're seeing it now. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, which one of your kids do you say you love the most? Right? It's like an impossible question because there's no wrong answer.
Right.
But I just think, you can't tell me Jaylen Brown isn't one of the best 12 players on the planet right now. If we're talking only American players, it just doesn't make sense. So I can understand what they were maybe thinking. But again, I feel like a lot of it was hiding behind the matchup, position of need, X, Y, and Z angle, which has merit.
Sure.
But where was all that selection process when it came time to picking between Derek White and Kawhi Leonard? Like, you didn't need Derek White's skill set when you had Kawhi Leonard.
Right.
But all of a sudden, when you don't have Kawhi Leonard, now you need that skill set over Jaylen Brown. And again, it's obviously working, so you can't say that was a bad choice. It's just a bizarre choice when, you're not playing someone like Tyrese Haliburton as a DNP on most nights. Mm-hmm. You're telling me that spot couldn't have been Jaylen Brown? If you're not going to use Haliburton, what's the point of him being on the roster?
Right. I think that's so much of it. Like I call it political, obviously not in the real political sense of the term, but the same way the All-Star game is typically political in terms of a name. And that's a good point. Like, why even Haliburton's just a warm body out there. Why couldn't that have been Jaylen Brown? So I think there's something there. It's weird. But one thing that I had thought about after the Tatum DNP and then Joel Embiid's DNP, and not a lot of people are talking about it, but you did bring it up in the blog, is this has potential ripple effects down the line.
Totally.
We love our players, our star players, taking one for the team, making sacrifices when it comes to playing for the Celtics or the 76ers or the Mavericks or whomever it may be. But when it comes to Team USA, that's their off time. And you got to, as much as we love patriotism, you got to sell them a little bit. And now it's like, am I going to go through this song and dance in my summer? Am I going to, work out for a couple of weeks and train with the team all of a sudden to be told that I'm not going to play in this Olympic Games? So do you see that as something that could potentially be tough for USA players to even make that choice to play for the team down the line?
I mean, I think that's the other side of the coin when it comes to these big name talents. Like, I don't think it would surprise anyone if Jaylen Brown, even if he gets invited, says, thanks, but no thanks. I feel like, you want to think that could happen with Tatum, but I feel like he understands the significance of playing for Team USA, where maybe he, because in 4 years, the LeBrons, the Durant, like they should all be, afterthoughts at that point. But at the same time, who's to say he doesn't take this experience and say, as long as Steve Kerr's there and he's going to keep treating me like a bozo, I'm not sacrificing. I'm going to spend, and they're playing deep into May, into June.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're playing a lot of basketball. You do have to wonder if moving forward, are they going to say it's not worth it for me to get embarrassed on the world stage as one of the best top 5 players in the league? And I think what helps is the Olympics are in LA in 2028, right?
Yeah,
so it's
that
like
does help. Yeah.
that one they may sign up for, but after that, it may be a situation where you're looking more towards like the Chets, the Paolos, the younger generation, the Cooper Flags eventually. But it's crazy when in 2020 Kevin Durant is saying Jayson Tatum is the next guy up on Team USA, and this is what he's dealing with the next go way through. I think nobody would be shocked if he just says, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to focus on rest and recovery, and not deal with it. But I feel like at the same time, he talks about what an honor it is and how big it is. And he wants to be viewed as one of these all-time great players. Well, if you're stacking up multiple gold medals, that certainly helps your resume, as you enter your NBA prime.
We are Rogue Media Sports.